Winter pressed against the windows of a small-town diner in Bozeman, Montana, when 5 men stepped inside with violence already decided. Their eyes locked onto one frightened man at the back booth, his hands shaking as fear crawled up his spine. Chairs scraped, the door clicked shut. No one moved. They thought the tall man nearby was just another tired traveler, walking stiffly, eating alone. They did not know he was Ethan Cole, a former Navy SEAL who had survived far worse than threats whispered over coffee. Beside him, a German shepherd lifted its head, silent, still, watching every breath. In that quiet moment, the hunters realized something was watching them back. Subscribe, comment, and share to see justice served. Winter knows first. Winter settled over Bozeman like a held breath. Snow pressing softly against glass and pavement. The cold sharp enough to make every sound feel closer. Ethan Cole paused before pushing open the diner door. The bell above it rang once, thin and tired. Warm air rushed out to meet him, carrying the smell of coffee, fried onions, and something sweet baking too long. He stepped inside with his usual stiffness, weight favoring his right leg, his left knee reminding him of places he no longer talked about. He wore the same clothes he always did. A navy winter coat that brushed his thighs, a red and black flannel beneath it, faded jeans, brown leather boots, scuffed but cared for. He never dressed to be noticed. He dressed to disappear. Shadow entered behind him. The German shepherd was 5 years old, black along the back, tan on the legs and face, ears upright and alert. His amber-brown eyes swept the room before Ethan even chose a seat. Shadow did not pull. He did not rush. He walked like he was counting exits. Ethan felt the familiar calm settle in his chest. If Shadow was steady, the world was still manageable. The diner was half full. A long counter on the left, booths lining the windows. Christmas lights still clung stubbornly to the trim, blinking in uneven patterns. Outside, snow drifted sideways under a street lamp. Ethan chose a corner booth with a clear view of the entrance. Across the room sat a man in his late 50s, average height, a little soft around the middle. Gray hair neatly combed, wire-frame glasses, an expensive wool coat draped beside him. His hands shook slightly as he lifted his coffee. Fear did that to people Ethan knew. Or guilt, sometimes both. Shadow noticed him too. Just a glance. Then the dog looked away. A woman approached Ethan's table. Early 40s, slim build, brown hair pulled into a practical bun. She wore a diner uniform faded by years of washing, her posture upright despite long hours on her feet. Her name tag read Lena. Her eyes were kind but watchful, like someone used to smoothing trouble before it spilled. "Coffee?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." She poured without asking how he took it. People like Ethan tended to drink it black. Lena noticed Shadow then, offered a small smile. Shadow didn't return it. He sat, still as stone, gaze angled toward the door. 2 minutes passed, then 3. The bell rang again. 5 men entered together. They were all around 40 to 50, dressed too well for the weather. Long coats, clean boots, hair trimmed with care. Not locals. Locals dressed for warmth, not appearances. These men scanned the room in practiced arcs, eyes quick, shoulders squared. Shadow's ears twitched. Ethan didn't turn his head. He watched them in the reflection of the window glass. The first man was tall, lean, dark hair combed back, face smooth in a way that suggested control rather than kindness. Mid-40s. He smiled easily, the kind that never reached the eyes. Calvin Brooks. Ethan would later learn. But right now, he was just the one who walked like he owned the floor. Behind him came a broader man, late 30s, thick neck, restless hands. His jaw worked constantly, like he was chewing on anger. Derek Mills, the impatient one. The other three spread out without speaking, one near the door, one by the counter, one drifting toward the back booths. A formation. Shadow shifted his weight. Not a growl, not a sound. Just tension, coiled and ready. Ethan's hand moved to Shadow's shoulder. Light pressure. Stay. The man with shaking hands in the back booth noticed them too. His breath caught. He looked toward Lena, then toward the windows, then back at his empty plate. Panic rose in his face like a tide. Calvin approached that booth, hands open, voice low enough not to carry. Ethan couldn't hear the words, but he recognized the tone. Polite. Reasonable. The kind of voice that asked for compliance while promising pain. Derek leaned against a nearby table, blocking the aisle. Lena froze behind the counter, her face drained of color, but she didn't scream. She didn't run. She reached for the phone beneath the register instead, fingers trembling. Shadow's gaze locked onto Derek. Derek noticed. His eyes flicked to the dog, then to Ethan. He smirked, but it faltered when Shadow didn't look away. Predators expected fear. Shadow gave them assessment. Ethan finally turned his head. He met Calvin's eyes, just for a second. Calvin hesitated. It was brief, barely noticeable, but Ethan saw it. A recalculation, a question forming too late. Ethan stood. The room seemed to shrink around the sound of his boots on tile. Shadow rose with him, perfectly aligned, silent as falling snow. Ethan didn't raise his voice. He didn't reach for anything. He simply stood there, shoulders squared, posture relaxed in a way only trained men ever managed. The world narrowed to breaths and distances. Ethan recognized those men, not their faces, their intent. And Shadow already knew what was coming. Ethan realized those people were not here by accident. Shadow stood still, but his eyes said something terrible was about to begin, the shape of a trap. Ethan did not move quickly. He never did when the room was this tense. Speed came later. First came position. He stood between his booth and the aisle, body angled just enough to block Shadow without making it obvious. The navy coat hung open now, revealing the red and black flannel beneath. His hands stayed relaxed at his sides, fingers loose, not clenched. Anyone watching closely would see restraint. Anyone watching casually would see nothing at all. Calvin Brooks turned slightly, adjusting his stance. He was close enough to Mark Reynolds now that his shadow fell across the table. Up close, Calvin looked mid-40s, lean, clean-shaven, dark hair combed back with precision. His eyes were sharp but patient, like a man who preferred problems solved quietly. "Sir," Calvin said to Mark, voice low and controlled, "we don't want to make a scene." Mark's lips trembled. He nodded too fast. Behind Calvin, Derek Mills shifted his weight. Late 30s, broad shoulders straining against his coat, cropped hair, face already flushed. His hands flexed like he was itching for something to go wrong. He didn't like waiting. Shadow watched Derek. The dog's ears were upright now, body still but coiled. His gaze followed every small movement Derek made, every tightening of muscle, every step that pressed too close to Ethan's space. Shadow didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. His warning was quieter than that. Ethan felt it through the leashless space between them. Pressure, awareness, readiness. The other three men completed their positions. One near the door, early 40s, narrow build, eyes constantly scanning. Another at the counter, pretending to look at the pie case. The last hovered near the windows, blocking any thought of escape. Lena stood frozen behind the register, phone half hidden in her hand. She was breathing too fast. Ethan caught her eye for a split second and shook his head, almost imperceptibly. Not yet. Calvin's gaze drifted back to Ethan. "You're in the way," Calvin said calmly. Ethan met his eyes, brown to brown, calm to calm. "I don't think I am." The words landed without volume, but they carried weight. Ethan's voice had that quality. It wasn't loud. It was certain. Derek snorted. "You want to sit down, old man?" Ethan didn't look at him. Instead, he took a slow step forward. Shadow mirrored him, stopping half a pace behind, body aligned with Ethan's leg. The dog's presence changed the air. People always underestimated silence. They mistook it for weakness. Calvin noticed the dog properly now. "A German shepherd," he said, more observation than comment. "Nice animal." Shadow's eyes didn't blink. Calvin's smile thinned. Ethan felt the familiar narrowing of focus, the world trimming itself down to angles and distances. He noted the spacing between Derek and the man at the door. He noted the position of the counter stools, the slickness of the floor near the drink station, the way Mark's chair would tip if pushed back too fast. Calvin took a step sideways, trying to regain control of the geometry. Ethan moved with him, not aggressively, just enough to deny the space. "I don't know who you are," Calvin said quietly, "but this doesn't concern you." Ethan tilted his head slightly. A habit from another life. It does now. Derek stepped forward. Shadow shifted. Just an inch. Just enough. Derek stopped. The realization crossed his face slowly, like cold water. The dog wasn't bluffing, and neither was the man holding its attention without touching it. Mark Reynolds let out a soft, broken sound. He clutched the edge of the table like it might keep him upright. Calvin exhaled through his nose. "We can do this easy," he said. "Or we can do it hard." Ethan glanced at Shadow. One short breath. That was all it took. Shadow's posture changed. Not forward, not backward. Centered. Focused. Ready to explode if commanded, ready to hold if not. Calvin swallowed. That was the moment Ethan knew. The shift. The crack in the plan. Ethan spoke, voice low, controlled, meant only for Calvin to hear. "I'm a former Navy SEAL," he said, "and this dog is better at reading people than I am." Calvin's eyes flicked just once to Derek, then back to Ethan. The room held its breath. From outside, somewhere beyond the snow and glass, the faint sound of a passing truck drifted by. Life going on, unaware of how close this place was to breaking. Lena's phone vibrated softly in her hand. Ethan saw it. Calvin did not. Ethan didn't move. He didn't rush. He waited. Because once this started, there would be no quiet way back. And Shadow already knew which man would move first. Lines that should not be crossed. Ethan measured the room in quiet increments. Distance to the counter, 2 strides. Distance to the door, 5, maybe 6, depending on who panicked first. The floor near the drink station was slick from melted snow, a liability, or an advantage. Shadow stood at his left, body aligned, ears forward. The dog's breathing was slow and even. That mattered. If Shadow stayed calm, Ethan could afford to wait half a second longer than anyone else. Calvin Brooks broke the silence first. "You said Navy SEAL," he replied, voice still level, but thinner now. "That was a long time ago for most men." Ethan didn't answer right away. He let the pause work. "It was long enough," he said finally. Derek Mills snorted, shifting his stance. He was too close now, less than 3 feet. That put him inside the reaction window. Ethan noted the angle of Derek's shoulders, the way his right hand hovered near his coat pocket, undecided. Shadow noticed it too. The dog's head turned a fraction. His eyes never left Derek's hand. Calvin lifted one finger slightly. A signal. Subtle. The man near the door adjusted his footing, widening his stance. The one by the counter slid his hand behind him, brushing the edge of the counter as if checking balance. They were coordinating. Ethan exhaled slowly through his nose. He shifted his weight just enough to favor his right leg, protecting the injured knee without advertising it. His boots squeaked faintly against tile, a sound most people missed. Not Shadow. Shadow's muscles tightened. Mark Reynolds whispered something under his breath, a prayer maybe, or a name. His hands shook harder now, knuckles white against the tabletop. Lena's eyes flicked between Ethan and the phone hidden at her side. Sweat beaded at her hairline despite the cold air drifting from the door. Calvin took another step, trying to angle past Ethan toward Mark. Ethan mirrored him, not blocking with force, blocking with presence. "You're escalating," Calvin said. "No," Ethan replied. "You are." Derek lost patience. "Enough," he snapped, lunging forward. It happened fast, but not fast enough. Ethan moved first, but Shadow moved with him. Shadow stepped into Derek's path, body low, head level, a silent wall of muscle and intent. He didn't bite. He didn't bark. He stopped Derek with nothing but position and certainty. Derek recoiled on instinct. That half-step backward was all Ethan needed. Ethan's left hand came up, palm open, striking Derek's forearm with controlled force. Not a blow meant to break. A blow meant to numb. Derek's hand spasmed. Something metallic clattered to the floor. A small knife, folding, cheap. Gasps rippled through the diner. Ethan followed with a precise movement, turning Derek's wrist just enough to force compliance. Derek grunted, knees buckling as pain radiated up his arm. Ethan guided him down, not slamming, not crushing. Control. Always control. Shadow shifted to block the others. The man near the door took a step forward. Shadow's head snapped toward him. Still no sound. Just teeth, visible now. A promise, not a threat. Calvin raised both hands slightly. "Easy," he said. "No one needs to get hurt." "You brought a knife into a diner," Ethan replied. "Someone already made that choice." He released Derek and stepped back half a pace, creating space without surrendering it. Derek collapsed against a chair, clutching his arm, shock written across his face. The room was frozen. Snow drifted past the windows, indifferent. Calvin's eyes darted around, recalculating. The formation was broken now, the rhythm lost. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Ethan spoke again, voice steady, low. "Sit your people down," he said. "Now." For a moment, Calvin looked like he might refuse. Pride flickered. Then calculation smothered it. He nodded once. The man at the counter raised his hands and backed away. The one near the window slid into a booth, eyes wide. The doorman hesitated, then followed. Calvin remained standing. "So what happens next?" he asked. Ethan didn't answer, because he heard it. The distant wail of sirens, faint but unmistakable, cutting through the winter air. Lena's shoulders sagged with relief. Tears welled in her eyes. Calvin closed his eyes briefly. Shadow relaxed just enough to lower his hackles, but his gaze never left Calvin's face. Ethan felt the shift again. Another one. The first confrontation was over. The second was just beginning. What the snow tried to hide. The sirens grew louder, then faded again. They weren't stopping. Not yet. Ethan noticed it immediately. Sirens that passed instead of arrived meant distance, delay. Someone had bought time, or someone had misdirected it. Calvin Brooks noticed too. His jaw tightened, just for a fraction of a second. Enough. Ethan filed it away. Shadow remained still at Ethan's side, posture relaxed but alert, eyes tracking Calvin with quiet focus. The dog had stopped watching the room. He was watching intent now, not movement. "Sit," Ethan said softly. Shadow lowered himself beside Ethan's left boot, muscles coiled beneath calm. Not disengaged, waiting. Calvin lifted his hands higher, palms open, a gesture meant to look cooperative. He was good at this. Late 40s, lean build, clean lines, eyes that understood leverage. His coat was tailored, expensive. Not the kind worn by men who plan to get their hands dirty. "You handled that well," Calvin said. "Professionally." Ethan didn't respond. Lena's phone rang quietly in her hand. She answered in a whisper, giving the address, her voice shaking but clear. She nodded once, as if receiving instructions, then slid the phone back beneath the counter. "Sheriff Alvarez is on his way," she said louder now. 5 minutes. Calvin smiled thinly. "That's unfortunate." The word settled badly. Mark Reynolds sat hunched in his booth, breathing shallowly. Late 50s, soft hands that weren't used to fear. His eyes darted between Ethan and Calvin like a trapped animal looking for a way out that no longer existed. Ethan stepped closer to Mark, placing himself between the booth and Calvin. His navy coat brushed the edge of the table. Red and black flannel visible now, sleeves rolled just enough to free his wrists. "You want to tell me why 5 men traveled across state lines for him?" Ethan asked quietly. Calvin's smile widened. "We didn't come for him," he said. "Not really." That earned him Ethan's full attention. Shadow's ears twitched. Calvin continued, voice smooth. "He's just leverage." Mark flinched. "What does that mean?" Calvin ignored him, eyes fixed on Ethan. "This town sits on land no one wanted. Until recently." Ethan glanced toward the windows, toward the dark outlines of mountains beyond the falling snow. Montana had always been like that. Quiet, overlooked, until it wasn't. "Zoning changes," Calvin went on. "Infrastructure projects, rail extensions, a pipeline, maybe. Things people don't pay attention to until the paperwork is already signed." Ethan felt the shape of it forming. Mark's voice broke. "I didn't sign anything." Calvin chuckled softly. "Not yet." Shadow shifted, nails clicking faintly on tile. Ethan watched Calvin's hands. Calm, open. But his weight was wrong, too centered, ready to move. "Your people didn't come prepared for a prolonged conversation," Ethan said. "You brought one knife." Calvin's eyes flicked, involuntary, to the door. Ethan saw it. "Which tells me the violence was supposed to be quick," Ethan continued. "Messy, but fast. Something you could blame on panic. A robbery gone wrong." Calvin didn't answer. "That means someone else is handling the real work," Ethan said. "Paperwork, permits, pressure." The silence stretched. Outside, snow thickened, swallowing sound. "You're assuming a lot," Calvin said at last. "I'm recognizing patterns," Ethan replied. Calvin's smile vanished. One of the men at the booth near the window shifted nervously. "Calvin, quiet!" Calvin snapped. Shadow's head lifted instantly. His gaze snapped to the man, teeth visible again. The warning was immediate and absolute. The man froze. Ethan felt it then. The escalation. Not physical, strategic. This wasn't about Mark Reynolds alone. Mark was a key, not a target. Ethan stepped back half a pace, giving Calvin room without surrendering control. "You're running out of options," Ethan said. "Sheriff will be here soon." Calvin nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "but not soon enough." The words landed like ice. Ethan moved, not forward, sideways. He shifted his stance, subtly blocking the angle between Calvin and the counter. Shadow rose with him, seamless, silent. Calvin's eyes widened a fraction. From behind the counter, something clattered to the floor. Metal. Lena gasped. Ethan turned just in time to see the man near the counter lunge, his hand coming up with something dark and compact. A second weapon. Shadow surged forward, fast and precise, placing himself between the threat and Ethan without waiting for a command. Ethan moved at the same time. The moment fractured, and outside, the sirens began to rise again, closer now, cutting through the snow. When the quiet holds. The moment fractured, then snapped into order. Ethan moved first, not toward the threat, but across it. He stepped into the narrow lane between the counter and the aisle, body angled to shield Lena and cut the attacker's line of sight. His navy coat flared slightly, boots gripping the tile despite the slick. He didn't rush, he didn't shout. He shortened the distance and stole time. Shadow surged in the same heartbeat. The German shepherd didn't leap. He planted himself between the raised weapon and the people behind the counter, head level, shoulders squared, eyes locked. No bark, no snarl. Just presence solid, unmovable. The man froze. Ethan saw the tremor in the wrist, the shallow breath, the indecision that came when a plan collapsed. He used it. "Drop it," Ethan said, voice low, exact. The weapon clattered to the floor. Ethan closed the remaining space with a controlled step, turned the man's shoulder, and guided him down. Not a slam, a redirection, the kind meant to end resistance without leaving damage behind. Shadow shifted to block the aisle, watching the others with the same quiet certainty. Calvin Brooks took a step back, then another. He lifted his hands higher, palms fully open now. The mask was gone. What remained was calculation giving way to acceptance. "Enough," Calvin said. "It's over." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The sirens swelled outside, this time slowing, stopping. Doors opened. Voices cut through the winter air. Red and blue light spilled across the windows, painting the diner in brief, restless color. Sheriff Tom Alvarez entered first. Early 50s, broad-shouldered, weathered face, gray stubble along his jaw. He wore a winter jacket dusted with snow and the steady expression of a man who had seen trouble before and knew how to take it apart. "Hands where I can see them," Tom said. Everyone complied. Ethan stepped back, hands visible, posture relaxed. Shadow sat at his side without being told, ears forward, eyes alert but calm. The deputies moved in with efficient restraint, securing Calvin and the others, cuffing wrists, checking pockets. Mark Reynolds sagged in his booth, relief finally breaking through fear. Lena leaned against the counter, one hand covering her mouth, tears slipping free now that she could afford them. Tom's gaze landed on Ethan. It lingered there. "Cell?" Tom asked quietly. Ethan nodded once. "Figured," Tom said. "You handled it clean." Ethan glanced at Shadow. "We did." Statements followed, calm voices, details exchanged. The weapon was bagged, phones collected, names written down. Outside, snow kept falling, soft and indifferent, like it always did. When it was over, truly over, the diner felt different. Not empty, settled. Tom shook Ethan's hand. "Town owes you," he said. Ethan shook his head. "Just passing through." Mark approached, coat back on, hands steadier now. "I don't know how to thank you." Ethan met his eyes, saw the understanding there. The knowledge that money wasn't the answer to everything. "Take care of the town," Ethan said. "That'll do." Mark nodded, swallowing hard. "I will." Lena poured fresh coffee without being asked. She set a mug in front of Ethan, another beside it on the floor for Shadow. "On the house," she said, voice warm despite the tremble. Ethan smiled faintly. Shadow lowered his head, content, eyes half-lidded but still listening to the room. Outside, the deputies cleared. The lights faded. Night reclaimed the street. Ethan stood, settling his coat, checking the familiar weight of boots on tile. Shadow rose with him, aligned as always. At the door, Ethan paused. He looked back, once not at the danger that had passed, but at the people left behind. A town that would sleep a little easier tonight. A place that had held when it mattered. Then he stepped into the cold. Snow brushed his shoulders. Shadow's breath puffed white in the dark. They walked down the quiet street together, leaving warmth behind them and carrying it forward, wherever the road led next. Some nights remind us that protection does not always arrive with flashing lights or loud miracles. Sometimes it comes quietly, on four paws, walking beside someone who has already given more than most. In a frozen corner of a small town, when fear pressed close and danger felt unavoidable, strength did not shout. It stood still. It watched. It waited. And in that waiting, something greater moved. Call it faith. Call it providence. Call it the unseen hand of God placing the right souls in the right place at the right moment. For those who believe, this story is not just about courage. It is about loyalty. A dog who listened without words. A man who chose restraint over rage. And a reminder that even in the coldest moments, warmth can still be found when hearts remain steady. Many say miracles are rare, but perhaps they are simply quieter now. Perhaps they look like disciplined loyalty. Perhaps they breathe softly at your side and step forward when you cannot. To every veteran who carries unseen scars, and to every loyal companion who never leaves their side, this story is for you. Share if you believe in angels with paws. Comment Amen to bless our veterans. Subscribe for the next story.